Hi, hello everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the third Holy Night. And tonight we are going to look at the year of the Wood Tiger, which begins on February the 10th, 2024. And just a little bit of context, my name is Anda Sutter. I'm a certified soul level astrologer. I studied at the College of Wizards and Visionaries with Mark Borax and Marcella Eversole, my teachers. And Mark practices a form of soul level astrology that he developed called soul level astrology. And he learned from a man named Elias Lonsdale, and the name of that system is Star Genesis. And tonight I'm going to be sharing with you about the third holy night, which falls in the sign of Aquarius and is about the year of the wood tiger. So I'm going to be reading to you from a transcript that some words that Elias spoke at the beginning of December in 2023. And these transcripts were gifted to me by Sheila Bachmeyer. And I just always like to begin with my gratitude for Mark, Marcella, Elias, and Sheila, and for all of the students in the college and my cohort that have been, and everyone who's been a part of um, helping this system of astrology to land. And so without further ado, here we go. So the wood dragon. So I'm going to do this in three parts. I'm going to be reading from the transcript from Elias. I'm going to be sharing a story of my own experience, a dream that I had about the dragon in 2017. And then sharing a little bit of Mark's teachings about the year of the dragon is about. So here we go. And Elias says that in the 20th century, in the history of the 20th century in particular, the thing is, you can't really be a dragon in this world. And even now, it's a steep learning curve because there's this one faculty that dragons come into the world with that is the devil's work, or that people think is the devil's work, and it's too much and it's too strong. And most dragons in their early life were told by everybody around them that seeing and knowing in a dragon way and embodying it through your senses in a dragon way is, at the very least, very suspicious. And if not a clear sign of being damned, being dangerous, and being strange. And like everybody else, dragons don't want to be seen as strange. So people that are born in the year of the dragon, tend to camouflage themselves. And then even when they get it together later in life, they tend to give each other some room to be strange, but they only have this very limited amount of room that they move in because they're afraid of the greater realities that they've cut themselves off from. And they are convinced that it's too much to go that way and to fully come into all of their dragonhood. And so, although the interesting thing about that is that Elias had the experience, both of his parents were dragons. And so he's speaking about that in the transcript, that he was always going that way into what a dragon would be, way further and further. And his parents never discouraged him in that way. And every parent tends to do a really good job of discouraging the flame of being in their progeny. And Elias's parents did a terrible job of that. He's giving them a backwards compliment here. He said that his parents always acted as though from a very early age that he should follow whatever was in him and not worry about what his parents were doing because that was their problem, what they were or weren't doing. And so that should have told him something, and it did tell him something for sure. And I'm going to switch back into the first person of his speaking here. And then in my life, one of the times when the dragon lesson hit home extremely, and now I'm going to bring something pretty heavy, was when my first wife and I gave birth to two children. And one of them, the older one, was born in the year of the dragon in 1976. And Corinne was her name. She was right there on the spot witnessing, he was right there on the whole spot witnessing the whole thing when she was born. And what he said was that she came out of the womb with this sort of fiery conviction that she had to see things the way she saw things and not let anybody else tell her otherwise. And when Corinne's mother caught wind of that impulse and sensed that in her, every possible alarm button went off in her mother, and she basically tried to suppress her at every point with a compulsivity that made no sense. It was too extreme. And I know that what everybody would say, well, it must have just been bad karma between them. And everybody's like, sure, of course, that's what's going on. But that doesn't really tell you anything. It was excessive. It was extreme, and it's reached the point now that in her 40s, in her late 40s, where Corinne wants nothing to do with her mother because she's not going to go that way. She's not going to be repressed and denied. And so, but there's something about being a dragon where everything's on the line all the time. And I know that not only the ones that I've just mentioned, but several others I've known, and Elias is referring to the people in his life that have been dragons, and do know have this thing going where they can't even explain it. They can't even fathom it, but it's clear to me that they constantly feel almost beyond anything else this pressure and this strain and this sense that they have everything on the line, like even the smallest daily things. And it's beyond anything reasonable, beyond anything that you would think would arise. It's not about circumstances, although of course it attaches itself to circumstances. It's about a sense of mission. It's about a sense of purpose. It's about being a fire-breathing being in a world where people have forgotten how to breathe in that way. It's about, I'm going to repeat that sentence, being a dragon is about being a fire-breathing being in a world where people have forgotten how to breathe in any way. It's being weaned on truth, and reality is the only thing that you can stand. And it's being shown constantly by everything in your life that you must be at your very best, or else you're missing what you came here to do. And this is just a side note that in this system of astrology, the dragon is associated with the 9th life stream, which is Capricorn. So those of you that are familiar with astrology, you might recognize some themes of Capricorn in here, because Capricorn and the dragon are both about mastery. So back to the transcript. Now, of course, I have to be really careful when I say that, because obviously that particular drive in that particular way can be very, very excessive and abusive, because we all know, whether we're dragons or not, we all know that when we almost force ourselves to be at our best all the time and to strive the highest and the furthest and all that, it creates more problems than it solves. And it's impossible to live that way. We all know that. Nonetheless, I can't be reasonable in this description. If there's an animal that you don't want to be reasonable about, it's dragons. Like in all the incredible novels and stories about dragons, you know they're beyond the range of other creatures. They come from a whole other realm, and they're way too big to be put in our categories. Too lofty, too obscure, too strange, too fascinating, too mythical, and too wild. So what we have here with the dragon archetype is the one who goes for the highest frequency, who embodies, even in every sense in our body, the highest frequency, who has the instinct and the intuition to follow what we really know inside, and who has this unerring accuracy to our perception when we really go there. And that's quite a package. The number one difficulty with the dragon, and with the dragon year, as 2012 was also a dragon year, the last one we witnessed, is it takes everything we've got inside to motivate ourselves to fulfill things at that level. And if we falter, which we do in this world easily, if we falter, there's a long way to fall. And so you can see so many dragons are dragging around because they've disappointed themselves, because they've frustrated themselves so much, because they've known better and still fallen for what everybody else is doing, and they just can't bear that reflection. But the way I and we see it, it's more than worth it, because if the world really is saturated with angels, and if you want more, this is Anne speaking again, if you want more context for him saying the world is filled with angels, go back and listen to the First Holy Night transcript, because that was a topic that we covered in the First Holy Night. What would you imagine angels make of dragons? And I'm not just being funny or cute or entertaining when I say that, because dragons belong to vaster worlds. We have to have one animal that insists on the clearest, truest, most quintessentially worth pursuing of all the levels. Now, there's a difficulty in raising ourselves up from the year of the cat, which we're completing now, to the year of the dragon. And there is a transition, and that's the one we're going through in December, January, into February. And this transition is a rough one. Why? Because the year of the cat, or rabbit, if you prefer, has been and still is, and will be until February, 2 more months. He's going to call it a home free all. It's a kind of, if you've ever seen a cat fight, they'll get into it completely. And we've been in a cat fight. Everybody's fighting against everything else like cats. And it's been a very testy, feisty, nerve-wracking, everything out on the surface type of year. And getting from that to the dragon is a steep climb. What would make it possible to really make that climb gracefully? Well, we've got a couple of months to give over the one thing that you've fallen for this year, that cats do fall for, and that cats delight in. It gives them a lot of energy. And that is that you've fallen for the proposition that you've got to be using your wits constantly, sharply, and you can't let anybody or anything take you out of the game. And it's time for us to move beyond that notion. And that notion is really quite strikingly, well, at the least, taking our clarity and conviction away from us and supplanting it with working far too hard on the outermost levels just to keep going. In essence, we're putting in everything we've got, and we think as victims that this is what we have to do, that there's no choice, and that's what we tell ourselves. But we have chosen to do what we have chosen to do is fight for our life, is to outwit the adversary, is to put it all out there, to be as clever and sharp and manipulative as the next person, only a little bit better. And it doesn't matter if it's masculine or feminine, old or young or white or 10 other colors or any other combination. We've learned to be operators in a world arena that is so grueling and punishing that all it really does to be operators in that world is makes it possible to keep going, which is what it advertises it can do. But what happens to us when we're all about keeping going? All about keeping going, and we don't actually remember what we're keeping going for. In essence, we've sort of chopped off the sides, lost peripheral vision altogether. Everything is focused on going straight ahead, not letting anybody or anything distract us, being as conscientious and effective and practical and productive as we could ever be, and proving to ourselves, and practical and productive, and proving to ourselves that we're good at this game of keeping going. So my reflection is, yes, we are good at this game, and I think we're great at this game, and I think just about everybody I know is good at this game, and those who don't seem to be are as well. They're just doing it at a slightly different angle. And it basically has become absolutely required that each one force the world into the mold of their self-interest, that each one keep things going the way that they think they should be going. Okay, but now let's look at it from a spirit perspective. Cats are as tuned up creatures as you could ask for. Now, what we've gotten tuned up to this year is whatever we think and assume and imagine and believe is most important to us. So we have definitely gotten sharply absorbed in making sure we're on the point of what's most urgent and critical, because the world is a difficult place to be, and you have to really watch out. But what happens, I ask you from your experience, what happens when you shift that even a little bit? Look at yourself during the year of 2023 and ask yourself, what happened when at different points you tried on for size, adjusting that vantage point just a little bit? Now I know when that happens, you didn't tell yourself you were doing that. It's part of the way we do the narrative that we have to make sure not to talk about it, not to think about it, because whatever we talk about or think about becomes automatic and it becomes conditioning. So I'm not saying that you knew what you were doing externally, but in retrospect, you can see it, and I know what happened. What happened was when you loosened the grip of iron necessity in your life, for whatever reasons you thought you could do that, there was an amazing and instantaneous shift. And you became so much more able to go on at many levels at once, rather than at this one sharp level that survival consciousness invokes. So I'll share an experience of mine in that vein that I feel is well worth going into. The whole year for me, the whole bloody year has been one extended version of what I just described as follows. I found myself 1,000 times at least to be getting very gritty and very sharply the way I was raised to be growing up in New York City. And I found myself to be holding my body and my soul in that way when we're under constant threat and surveillance and every kind of thing you could ever think about. And I found myself at those times to be trying way too hard to put it all together and make things work and keep them going. And I have found that while it does work, of course, that it also decimates my health and my sense of well-being. So at many times, many junctures, and especially in the spring when Pluto went into Aquarius, I've been discovering what happens when I put my attention on a vaster spectrum. And I don't narrow it tightly to the survival consciousness. And I've found over and over again that it works, and that it takes me somewhere, and that it's incredibly helpful. And fortunately, the woman I've been with for 25 years takes to that kind of thing very well, that kind of shift. And so we've both been in that a lot, a whole lot. And we've been looking at what happens when we open our awareness to the full spectrum of what's really going on here. And I can say that for me, this entire year has been one continuous sequence of lessons in letting go of the customary program of nothing's ever going to work. And this in the midst of being with 4 adolescents who are very susceptible to the program of nothing's ever going to work. And being around other people in cities and stuff who are very susceptible to that program. Nothing's ever going to work. 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 But what I find and what we find is everything's working just fine as soon as you stop saying that nothing's ever going to work. But the way it's working is by natural forces gathering rather than the sheer cleverness of your own mind. So for me, what it's been like this year is discovering that what I could figure out how to keep it going is dreadfully predictable, very workable in a very limited way, and that whenever I can let myself become aware of the whole, of what's really coming through, then I let myself breathe. I let myself be. And as soon as I'm letting myself be, things do open up tremendously. And now I understand that I'm working very closely, not only with awake ones and with fairy beings and with future beings, but very strongly with angels and archangels who are giving me such a matrix of unfoldment that really all I have to do is pay attention in that greater sense and not be so drastically absorbed in paying attention at the outer mental compulsion level. So that is what Elias Lonsdale had to share with us about the Year of the Dragon. And I want to share a story about a dream that I had where in 2017. So I'm going to give a little setup for this dream. First of all, I rarely remember my dreams. It's very uncommon that I remember them, and usually when I do, they feel like they're way more than dreams. So this dream happened in May of 2017. And in June of 2015, I went for my first in-person astrology circle in Putney, Vermont, on Putney Mountain, at Mark and Marcella's home. I had just finished my first semester of training in the College of Visionaries and Wizards, and as I walked on their property, I found myself stepping on this kind of like this granite, this like sheet of rock. And all of a sudden, I felt the rock and I felt the earth, and I looked up and I looked around, and I could see that I was on a land where there was a dragon. And if you're not familiar with that, in Chinese feng shui, they talk a lot about dragon land and tiger land. And I could see the dragon. I could see that where I was standing on it was by like the hindquarters and the tail. And I could see that the way that the dragon curved around on the property, and that its back was up on this ridge that was above a beautiful spring-fed pond that they have on their property. And in that moment that I perceived that dragon, I knew I'm going to come back and live here at some point. It was just this knowing that I had that didn't make any sense to me. I hadn't even met Borax. I had met Mark Borax like 10 minutes before that for the first time in my life, right? So I didn't know why I was feeling that, but I just had that feeling. Well, fast forward to 2016, and I know that I need to go into seclusion for a while for various reasons that I won't go into here. And I was looking for some place to go and be in seclusion. And I really wanted to go someplace warm because it was going to begin in January and go until like June or July. And I wanted to go like to Tennessee or Florida or someplace warm and easy. Well, nothing was opening up. The only place that was opening was to go to Mark and Marcella's in Vermont. And so on January 13th, 2017, I landed in Putney Mountain, Vermont, and the next day, or 2 days later, 13 inches of snow dumped. And I was in Vermont winter, and I spent the winter there. And then in the spring, for various reasons, I left the dwelling that I was in, and I lived for the next 3.5 months in a tent and a teepee on the side of the mountain, just on Marcella and Mark's property, just above where their home was. And as luck would have it, that meant that I was actually sleeping and living on the back of the dragon at that time. And so I think it was about the third or fourth night that I was sleeping in the tent in the teepee. And I read a book, and I read some prophecies from a book on my way to sleep. And then I had this dream. And in the dream, I was the dragon, and yet I was riding the dragon at the same time. And that's very hard to describe. And any of you who know your dreams, we have these experiences. I was the dragon, but yet I was riding the dragon. And the dragon took me, and by the way, I was completely sober. The dragon took me, and we flew up way above the earth, and we could look down and we could see all of the continents on the planet. And I had this knowing with the dragon of being able to sense what the light and what the dark of each continent and culture, not just countries, but like kind of the culture of North America or the culture of Eastern Europe, or the energy that was surrounding like Japan and China, or the energy of Central and South America. And I had this ability to perceive at that moment as the dragon what the light and the dark of each culture was, and where each culture was moving forward in life and evolving, and where it was being held back and in darkness. And then the dragon, I did something really interesting. We dove down through the stratosphere, and we landed in this scene. And this scene was actually quite disturbing and horrifying. I'm going to give you a trigger warning here. And what we landed in was the scene of a father screaming at his daughter. She had either said a curse word or said something that was unacceptable to say, and he was very angry with her, and he was very abusive with her. And the father took his knife and he cut out the daughter's tongue, and the daughter was screaming and blood was spurting everywhere. And it was absolutely horrifying seeing and witnessing this in this dream. I have no idea how I didn't wake up at that point, but I didn't. And then the dragon and we flew and we went back through time. We rewound time and we went back to this moment in time. And it was very precise. There was no thinking about it. There was no figuring it out. It was this immediate thing that we did in in an instant, in a second. We flew back to this point in time when the father who had cut out his daughter's tongue was being yelled at by his father for doing something wrong and having his mouth washed out with soap. And then we rewound just a little bit past that and we changed that scenario with the father. We rewound time and we created a scenario with the father where with his father, instead of yelling and screaming at him and hitting him and washing his mouth out with soap, sat down, put his son on his knee and talked to him and explained why what he had done wasn't okay, and really switched from being an abusive father to a beautiful, benevolent father, and teaching his son something in the true sense of the way. Instead of teaching him a lesson by being abusive, he taught him a lesson about how to be a better human. And then immediately as soon as that was done, the dragon and we flew back to the time when he was when the man who had been the young child that we had rewound time with was with his daughter, and he was doing the same thing. His daughter had said something that was not well spoken, and he took his daughter on his knee and he explained to her and looked in her eyes and very lovingly, firmly, compassionately, gently explained to her what wasn't okay about that so that she learned and she understood. And so we changed that reality from this girl being abused and having her tongue cut out, and from this young man being abused and being hit and having his mouth washed out with soap. We transformed that reality into one of compassion and of love and of true learning. And then I woke up from the dream very late, because most mornings there on the mountain I would wake up between 5 and 6:30 because the ravens and the crows would come and they would make a lot of racket and wake me up. And I woke up and I looked at my watch or my phone or whatever, and it was 9:47 a.m. And that I never slept that late there. And I woke up and I just laid there and my body was like pinned to the bed, and I literally couldn't move for like an hour, hour and a half while I reeled with the reality of this dream. And so that's my best way in many ways of talking to you about what is a dragon and what does a dragon do and how do we be with the dragon. Because to explain what is a mythical beast, that we've never experienced necessarily in our three-dimensional everyday reality is a little bit of a challenging thing. What is a dragon, right? And what does it mean to go into the year of the dragon? And so the other thing that I want to do before I complete tonight is say a little bit more about the dragon from teachings from Mark Borax from the College of Visionaries and Wizards. And so the thing about the dragon is that the dragon flies high, and it has a lot to live up to. And the dragon, the key word for the dragon is ethic. And the ethic meaning value. And the dragon is a mythical beast, and that means that it is endowed with an extra dimension, with a further realm of experience. And typically in this world, we don't believe in mythical creatures, right? They're mythical. They don't actually exist. And so therefore, people that are born in the year of the dragon, and us, when we go to tap into the energy of the dragon, what we have to confront is where we don't actually believe in ourselves, because the dragon is mythical, it doesn't exist, and so how can it possibly even believe in itself? And so the dragon spends its life, it has to prove to itself that it really deserves to exist. And along that quest, it will magnetize shadow realms to it, and it will trap itself in every possible way, and then see if it knows how to get out of it. And that's how the dragon births itself into being a dragon, is by constellating things to it so that it can prove to itself that it actually does exist, it is real, and it does have this power, and that it can rise into the potency of the fire-breathing being that it is. And the dragon has the steepest, most demanding of all paths to follow of all of the 12 oriental animals, because the dragon has to awaken to itself as a unique, never here before creature. And the odds are stacked against it. And the world doesn't have any use for strange cases and for mythical beasts. And yet, inside of the dragon, a vision burns, and a remembrance lives, and a realization that will not go away, because the dragon knows that it's here for a reason, and that the very qualities that it battles through with itself are the preconditions for becoming real. And the dragon has an immense capacity for truth and a gargantuan appetite for what can be unpopular and uncomfortable in how we look at things and how we see things. And a monumental desire is within the dragon to test itself and to pit itself against any formidable obstacle and discover what it's made of, and whether just perhaps it could be that rare bird, a dragon that's ready to hatch. So those are words from Mark Borax. And so that is what I want to share with you about the year of the wood dragon that's getting ready to come to us. Now, the wood element is the slow-moving element. It burns fast in fire, but wood takes a lot of water and it grows very slowly over time. So we have this combination of the wood element combined with this fiery passion of a dragon. And so in 2024, when we switch from the year of the cat to the dragon, the question that's here for all of us is, can we actually believe that we are the powerful, magical, mythical, potent, truth-knowing, fire-breathing creatures that some part of us knows that and senses ourselves to be? So we're all going to have the opportunity to find out what we're made of next year in the year of the dragon. And I didn't end up reading from this tonight, but I just want to share, if you want to know more about the energy of the dragon, this is a book that was published in 2023 by Mark Borax, my teacher, called The Ruby Heart of the Dragon, and he speaks more about the energy of the dragon in that book, and you can find it on Amazon. So I highly recommend that. And part of this book is looking at what we call the north and the south nodes, which in this system of astrology we also call the dragon's head and the dragon's tail, or the dragon's breath and the dragon's blood, and looking to see how can we awaken the dragon within us. So that's a tool that you can use during this year to help awaken your dragon. And, I haven't been doing commercials, but I am going to take a moment with that, since I just did a commercial for Mark, to say that I am in private practice and I would love to do a reading for you. I would love to help you fall more in love with your soul. I would love to help you know more about who you are, why you're here, and help you awaken your dragon. And you can find me online at www.livingfutureastrology.com. And thank you so much for joining me for the third Holy Night, and I will see you tomorrow with the fourth Holy Night, probably right around 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So take care, and thank you so much. Good night.